Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. This is the Fintech Frenzy Daily Show. It used to be live, okay? Today is the first episode. It is not. We're going to be just pre-recording it for you guys. That way, we're still able to get you guys daily news and all these sorts of things, but we'll be able to add extra stuff like the chapters that you see down below, subtitles that are available, while still doing all sorts of things like Q&As and everything else, but hopefully reaching a more broader audience, as well as this actually being available on YouTube podcasts. Today, the conversation that we're going to have is talking about the PayPal executives that are fighting over which company does it best. The three companies are the modern payment solutions that everyone knows and loves. I'm talking about PayPal, Stripe, and Adyen, okay? We have a PayPal former director, a former vice president of Adyen, and then a current account executive at Stripe. Well, although Stripe is not actually a stock, they're going to be talking more about Adyen and Braintree, the PayPal company. But I don't want to hold it back anymore. What I will be showing, however, let me go ahead and share my screen, is these conversations. This is Rahard Jacques, well, this is him, and he's actually gotten all of these transcripts for all these beautiful, beautiful payment executives, and we're going to be covering all of them, okay? So I've already gone through and covered all this, and I want to just give you guys the highlights. First off, there were in part of the conversation with PayPal's former directors, it started off like this, with the analyst and then the expert, okay? Whenever being questioned on the share of branded checkout as a total percentage of checkout wallets, PayPal's former director had this to say. PayPal's total market share of branded checkout is around 15 to 20% of all transactions. They're talking literally of the whole market share. PayPal no longer has the power that it used to back in eBay's days, so to say. You need to have me no matter what sort of phase in their business. No player in the payment space has that sort of power anymore. The power is shifted more to the merchants, and those merchants are looking for more of the unbranded checkout style of business, meaning more of the Braintree, right? The power of the checkout that PayPal has, but without the PayPal name slapped all over it. One of the other parts that sort of goes with the unbranded is Braintree has all of their amazing checkout processes. And then on the other side is PPCP, which is PayPal Complete Payments. Well, PayPal Complete Payments is the offer that Braintree has, except it actually is branded PayPal, okay? There's a little bit of a misunderstanding with that it's going to be a higher take rate than unbranded because it does come with that brand name, but it's a much smaller product than I think people give it credit for. In fact, even I was surprised whenever this executive actually said PPCP probably counts for about only 5% of the total transactions that the unbranded Braintree actually makes up for. So we said, okay, roughly what are the take rates for each segment? Asking to the PayPal former executive. He said, well, branded was probably around 2.2%, Braintree about 1.5%, and then PayPal Complete Payments is somewhere in between that, around 1.7%. So then going on asking about the more about Braintree, he said, okay, comparatively to the modern payment solutions like Adyen, Stripe, and Braintree, what would you say is the win rate whenever putting deals up against them at the same table for those certain clients? He said, it's pretty much exactly what you would suspect. About 1/3 or even 1/2 of the time they win the deal. Okay, out of those three big names, the fact that Braintree could be winning 1/3 to 1/2 of all of the deals that are coming through is very compelling. That being said, the next question, they said, anything else important to highlight for us? Anything else that you're seeing in the landscape? He said, Brazil is a very different story. He said, what we're seeing there is quite scary. Pix has taken over the market completely, disrupting Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, every single player that exists there. It's only happening in Brazil, but Pix is already the #1 player in just a year and a half. If other countries understand what Pix has done, the payments area could completely change. Now, Pix is exactly what you think it is. It's a payment provider similarly to FedNow or India's UPI, which all have similar systems, but not quite the same adoption rates. See, India's UPI has been around a little bit longer and still hasn't seen half of the success that Brazil's Pix has seen. Now, let's go into part two of this interview where Rahard actually breaks this down even further. One of the questions that the analyst actually said was, why did you say that the merchants have all the power? He said, we can discount branded checkout in order to gain market share. Meaning, if there's a bunch of other people that have great options like Adyen and Stripe, what PayPal's offering can do is say, hey, we'll offer you that, but then if anyone goes to checkout with PayPal, we will give you a discount because you already use Braintree. Well, if a certain large amount of your overall audience is already using PayPal, then it could be a great reason to switch over because you could end up saving a lot of costs there. He said this would hurt margins, however, because obviously if you're discounting, you're not going to be making as much, right? That's pretty obvious. But then he said, however, we rarely try to do this and we want to keep branded as a premium product. And most of the margin compression is actually a percentage of unbranded to branded processing. It's not as much of actually just bringing over and giving discounts to PayPal checkout like a lot of people had suspected, including me. He's saying that the reason why margin compression is going down is just because Braintree is excelling faster than PayPal's checkout. That's a much different way than I would have actually have thought about that. Another question said, are the non-domestic US transactions at a higher take rate than, obviously domestic US transactions? He said, one that's very interesting is Latin America. It has a much higher take rate, as high as 5%, but this is mainly due to the high fraud rates, so it kind of evens out. He said, but the take rate for domestic US is about 2.2% for branded. For EU, it's probably somewhere along the lines of 2%, but what's most interesting is cross-border at 4 to 5% take rates. Okay, so that's really where we want to go next, is more of those global, full-on like cross-border transactions. There's a much higher take rate. It does include a lot of, foreign exchange fees and these sorts of things for PayPal, so it's not a complete net take rate, but still much better. Another question was, what is the issue with Braintree and why hasn't it taken more market share compared to the competitors? This is where it's a little bit concerning. And whenever we talk about Adyen and Stripe going forward, there's going to be a lot more concerning things for PayPal, but let's just read it out. PayPal's loss of market share was due to little focus. This is what his words are. Trying to be a super app, a payment processor, both in branded and unbranded, online and in-store, honey coupons and reward programs, crypto, Venmo, and even more. It's a lot compared to the focus of Adyen, Stripe, Apple Pay, and the likes. Wow. It is sort of the benefit of PayPal that they do have all those services, but obviously whenever you're comparing them one-to-one versus a very focused Adyen, obviously there can be some problems with product differentiation. Now, that was the entire conversation, or at least the big highlights that I took from the conversation with PayPal's former director and the analyst that had that conversation. The next one is Adyen's. This one is really exciting. This is a stock that I've been following, ticker symbol ADYEY. Well, let's just jump right into it, okay? Here's some of the questions from the analyst. How is Adyen viewed versus their competitors? He said, in person, on a global scale, no one can compete with Adyen. That's the biggest advantage. We own the full value chain, and investing heavily on performance has been a key differentiator. Improvements could be made for Adyen for customer service and account management, but that usually comes with more mature companies anyway, so they actually are looking to improve on that. This is quote unquote, there is definitely some envy from our competitors. Very exciting. He said, they literally say, when I say competitors, I am talking about the likes of Stripe, Checkout, WorldPay, Fiserv, and Global Payments. He literally doesn't say anything about PayPal or Braintree. Okay. He said, for SMBs, meaning small to medium-sized businesses, Stripe Connect still outshines Adyen by a long shot. But on an enterprise level, nothing has come close to Adyen. These are his words. He said, Stripe is trying to work up market and Adyen is trying to work down, but we feel comfortable in our placement here. The analyst goes on to say, okay, but what about the competition? How do you view them? How are they being viewed? He said, Checkout is stealing volume, meaning checkout.com. Checkout is stealing volume from Adyen and competing on price, bringing it down across the marketplace. Quote unquote, he says, Checkout is equally as good as Adyen. Against the more legacy players, Adyen has a hard time competing in the legacy industry. So whenever he means legacy competitors, he means WorldPay, he means Fiserv, he means, a lot of those more like global payments, for example. A lot of those more older names, the more modern solutions are more like Stripe, Adyen, and Braintree. But he does talk about Braintree. Just give him a second here. He said they have a harder time competing in legacy industries like healthcare, education, government services, grocery stores, and gas stations. These have been really hard for us. Whenever you're talking about more digital, newer age services like Netflix, Uber, a lot of these newer sort of places, this is where they tend to choose Stripe and Adyen, the newer positions. The guy said, why haven't you specifically spoken about Braintree? What do you have to say about this? He said, Braintree, I'm not making this up. Braintree is not even close to the performance of the likes of Adyen can offer on a global scale because they're not a fully fledged acquirer or processor. That's the difference. Braintree is getting more traction because PayPal is offering amazing prices on PayPal's branded and FX rates, but they really can't compete. Local payment methods have been a massive flaw for Braintree over Adyen over time. For Adyen, the local payments can offer better pricing, but being an acquirer in more countries can lead to fewer issues, and issuing banks in those regions can hurt authorization rates. This is why Braintree can't compete, because they're always trying to push PayPal's products. It's very interesting, right? Like that sort of problem that maybe Braintree has is the selling of PayPal's branded checkout. Anyway, he said, is there a push for Adyen in the US? And what will it take to see success there? He said, problem with the US market is bank. So if you guys don't know, let me clarify something. Adyen is very, very good in Europe, trying to break into a lot of Asian territories, but not very strong in the US just yet. It's also the most important market. They're hoping to break in there. There's definitely teams working there. Anyway, he said, the problem with US markets is bank payment tech. You don't see this anywhere else. Like Chase payment tech, for example. If you have a corporate account at Chase and a treasury account, they will practically offer payment processing for free as a bundling effect with the rest of their products. This is where product stands out for Adyen because they can't compete on pricing. So they have to be a much better service. Regardless, he said, Adyen is going to do very well in the US, but with legacy industries lacking, it's seemingly the largest problem, but it could also be the largest opportunity. They go on to have a conversation. He said, can you talk more about the overall competitive environment? Talking to the Adyen former vice president here. He said, 5 to 7 years ago, it was extremely hard to compete with Adyen on performance, but things have started to even out more and more. Now pricing is where a lot of the deals are being won. But with volume comes a lot better ability to price, and Adyen is growing in volume very quickly. So they are actually able to sort of be better with pricing, like the big names, like for example, Fiserv or WorldPay, which do a ton more volume than the smaller but more agile businesses. There's a new system called authorization providers, and you also hear it be called multi-processors as well, but we're just going to call it authorization providers for now. He said it helps route volumes to the lowest cost providers and allowing multiple different services compete for a single transaction. He's saying this has been putting pressure on everyone in the industry, but it goes both ways. If Adyen was 100% of the volume for a single merchant, then yes, it can hurt the flows of new volumes away from Adyen. But I never thought about it this way. Listen to this. If, for example, a new merchant was using Checkout, Braintree, or Stripe, and then started using an authorization provider to sort of price better pricing across the industry, well, now Adyen might have a part to play in a client or merchant that they've never been able to do so. So they could maybe add 30, 40% of total volumes for a new client that they've never seen before. And now the merchant may even pay an additional fee that not only to the processors for paying multiple different processors, which hopefully does bring down a smaller fee, but then you also have to pay the third party that's actually offering the multi-processor to begin with. So sometimes it may not be the best alternative if the prices actually start to go down. He said companies as large as Netflix, Facebook, Microsoft, these sorts of sizes all have similar multi-processing tools. However, all the volumes have been built in-house. So those tools are just not actually having to pay those fees. But for the smaller players that are using them, will have to pay fees to a third party. The analyst said, overall, though, although this can be a good or bad thing, is this not overall a bad thing for the industry? This is what he thinks. He said, I believe there will be more. What will be more common is testing of a lot of different providers over more volume based on performance. And then as the acceptance rates and performance are actually seen in one competitor versus the other, much more volume is actually going to flow through them based on performance and not purely on price. Because at the end of the day, a closing out of a single sale will be much more important than a canceled sale at a much lower price or something along these lines. He said, what I also think is important is Adyen is by far the most dominant in a digital space on a global scale, and Adyen is growing market share for in-store processing. He just wanted to make that clear. He said, okay, can we talk, this is what the analyst had to say. He said, can we talk more about regional progress for Adyen? He said, Adyen in the US, like I said, is still underdeveloped with a lot more work to be done. Plus, it's a more competitive area. But Adyen in Asia, specifically in Japan, has been an amazing investment and a growing market share overall. We couldn't be more excited for Adyen in Japan. Going on, because this is very exciting too. I know this is a lot, but Adyen has a different way of compensating employees. And I've never quite understood it as well as I did. And this video will sort of sum up how Adyen does more of their sort of compensation for their employees. They pay a lot less than the likes of Stripe or PayPal. And he even says that. He goes, Adyen has historically not paid employees nearly as much as Stripe or PayPal. This has been hard to grow, employee count quickly, but does help with the margins overall. Recent global tech layoffs have seemingly been in Adyen's favor, however, as certain people are getting rid of their highest paid employees as they're too hard on price making. Great. That was the conversation with Adyen. The last one, however, is a conversation with Stripe talking about both Adyen and Braintree. Luckily enough, he actually didn't talk about Stripe. I'd like to hear a little bit about Stripe, but considering they're not actually a stock I can purchase, I don't really care. I am both a shareholder of Adyen and Braintree, well, meaning PayPal. So hearing from this current account executive at Stripe was really, really compelling. Let's first talk about what he had to say about Adyen. Adyen had some of the best revenue per employee numbers that I have ever seen based on their hiring style. Very tight focused company. And although they're an enterprise focused business, meaning they're all the way up in the high, working up market, he said, they are very much one of the emerging companies still in that space. Comparatively to Fiserv, Global Payments, and WorldPay, these legacy players are still doing roughly $3 to $4 trillion of processing volume annually. Wow. He said, in regards to Adyen's salary, he said, Adyen does not pay commissions. They actually just pay salary. And if you're an actual overachiever, you don't get benefited from that until years after, where they will give you larger and larger salary increases. This is very atypical across the board, but it greatly rewards people who stay for the longer period of time, meaning that young salespeople can be rewarded without any sort of can be hired without any history of any other, payment provider or sales type jobs, and work their way up with Adyen for 7, 8, 10 plus years, where the more older tenured salespeople really don't do well at Adyen at all, and you don't see them getting hired. Quite interesting. Very, very different approach. It's why people get very excited about Adyen as well. But anyway, whenever asked about Braintree, this is where things get bad. He said, Braintree is not a legacy incumbent, but they are not a real challenger whenever it comes to modern payment service providers either. He said, not trying to put them down, but they were much better off before PayPal acquired them, focusing more on their because they are focused more on their wallet products. From the time PayPal acquired Braintree to now, the Braintree offering hasn't changed much. They're stuck. This is literally what he said. They are stuck. If they add more payment methods, that will take away from PayPal's wallet. The bias may be hurting them as a standalone provider. I don't think that they've invested enough towards great products like subscription billing or banking as a service or any other financial products that have to do with issuing. It's just seriously a problem. Braintree is winning when it comes to pricing, but the customer is not sophisticated enough to know what it's missing versus the better, more modern solutions. Now, I'll have to disagree with him there. Okay, if a customer chooses one product over another, even if it's not as good as the other one, the one that they chose is the right one. That's the one that won the deal. Okay, so even if it's a better thing with more bells and whistles, obviously the actual, client doesn't care about that. That's why some people say that the salesman is much more important than the actual engineer, right? Winning the deal is what puts money in the pockets, not the engineers. However, over time, if they do get to see every single product, then maybe product will win. But I disagree that he's saying the customer is not sophisticated enough to know. It doesn't matter, right? That's the whole McDonald's or Burger King saying, right? Is the customer is always right. So if they don't like yours, it's not because they're wrong, it's because that's what they chose. But anyway, he said the merchants that they're going after are most likely already, a large percentage of their overall sales are already PayPal's. So they get to see an opportunity to lower those costs by sort of bundling both Braintree and PayPal wallets, which is exactly what the PayPal director said they weren't doing. But this Stripe employee is saying, no, they really are. They are discounting branded checkout for the likes of getting the Braintree transactions as well. Plus, the name brand of PayPal never hurts. It's a great ad, and the solution is just good enough to win those deals. Quite interesting take compared to the others. It's incredible listening to Adyen and Stripe executives, how they talk about Braintree. It's like they really don't even bring them up as a offering or a real competitor at all. It's really, really surprising, actually. They're saying the only reason why they're winning is pricing, and that might be true. But, I mean, hey, they're still winning deals at 1/3 or half the time whenever compared to Adyen and Stripe, right? He said, what are the other things that we should be that we need to understand in this industry? This is what the analyst said to the Stripe account executive. He brought up the multiprocessors multiple times. He said they're very important for a payment-heavy merchant like Amazon or Uber. He's talking about the authorization providers. He said there's a little optimization in payment infrastructure for people that do millions of transactions could mean millions more in revenue. He said the larger, less frequent item sellers and more luxury brands that don't sell as much but higher ticket items don't necessarily need these optimizations nearly as much. Now, I think that's super important to add because Braintree, if you guys don't know, offers a smaller percentage of the total sale as a cost, but a higher percentage of a fixed fee, which means we've spoken about this before, but if a Walmart were to choose between Stripe or Braintree, they'd be better off choosing Stripe. But if a Louis Vuitton were to actually choose between, Braintree or Stripe, they'd probably be better with Braintree because the difference between 30 cents and 49 cents per transaction is nothing, but the difference between 2.9 and 2.5% is a big deal, right? He said the multiprocessors are bringing down the industry. They're pitting 2 to 3 processors against each other. So if the transactions are too high, then you're necessarily not going to get as much volume going forward, bringing the price down for the entire industry. It sucks, but that's where we are, right? That's just the truth. So those were the transcripts that Rihard actually gave us. Thank you so much. I do really appreciate it. It was absolutely amazing insights. I do want to hear more from PayPal. There is going to be some investor conversations, fireside chats on the 7th of September and the 14th of September. So I will be hosting those live if you guys want to come around those times. I think they're around 4 p.m. both days. I will be live doing those on both YouTube and probably X as well. I did want to do a Q&A portion of the show. However, last episode, you guys didn't know, this is the first actual show. So if you guys have any questions regarding the conversations between PayPal, Adyen, or if you have any other questions about fintechs like Square, SoFi, Affirm, Lemonade, Robinhood, whatever, leave it down in the comment sections down below. Thank you so much for watching. But this has been the Fintech Frenzy. Bye for now.